Massachusetts is an equitable state, which is a fancy way of saying the court's going to do what they think is fair, what they think is equitable between the two of you. When we're dealing with property, essentially, I think the best way to put it is if you think you have a big old pot right in front of you, all your property, whether you brought it into the marriage or whether you accumulated it while you were married, is going into this big old pot. The court's going to stir it around and then they're going to start pulling things out and they're going to say, oh, you have this house. So how are we gonna divide that? Are we going to sell it and then you guys both split the equity? Are we going to have one of you keep the house and have to buy the other person out of their equity? So just because it comes out of the pot doesn't mean it's getting split right down the middle. It means that it's going to be divided in a way that the court believes is fair. Now, that really depends on a lot of different factors. 50-50 is kind of the starting point. It's what you typically can expect when getting divorced. However, again, it's equitable, so it doesn't have to be 50-50. It might end up being somebody gets 60% of the assets and the other person gets 40%. Everything goes in that pot, and the judge says, hey, you get this, or you get the value for this. You're getting divorced and you're thinking, oh my goodness, how is this going to be divided? Basically, it all depends on the state that you live in. Massachusetts is an equitable division state, which means essentially the court's going to decide what they think is fair. And that's how it's going to get divided. Now, that's different than a community property in some of those states where the court says, hey, it's 50-50. And that's what it is. In Massachusetts, it's equitable, which means that just because the framework and I think what the general expectation is if both parties were contributing during the marriage, they're each getting 50% of the estate when the divorce happens. But that's not always the case. And there can be an argument made for why somebody should get more or somebody should get less. Debt and divorce, two things that really are tough to deal with. And that's because debt is a marital property. So that is also getting divided within a divorce. And that can be really hard because it might be a situation where somebody ran up debt because maybe everybody was living beyond their means. But just because they ran it up doesn't mean it's all theirs. So debt, for the most part, is being equitably divided, which again, kind of falls into a 50-50 division. Now, there may be ways that it's not necessarily one person paying. So maybe the person who retains the debt gets more of the equity in the home, or the debts are paid off from equity from the sale of the equity in the home. So there's lots of ways to deal with it, but debt doesn't just go away because you're getting divorced. We're going to figure out how it gets divided between the two of you. Getting divorced. I had a home before I got married. Now I'm married. My home's individual, right? Well, in Massachusetts, no. Unless you entered into a prenup that kept that out of the marital property, it came in. So there may be reasons and arguments that you can make of why you should retain that, but guess what? It's still going to be considered a marital asset. Absolutely everything, whether you had it before or during, is considered marital asset. And that needs to be divided up in the divorce. There is no individual property in Massachusetts. Once you're married, it's all yours. We got to figure out how to split that up for you. You have a home, you're getting divorced. Now what? There's typically a couple different ways that you can divide up that home. The first is one person is going to stay in it and they're going to keep it. And what happens there is they buy the other side out of their equity. So let's say you have a $500,000 home, which in Massachusetts, I don't think anything is worth $500,000 anymore. So I'm just using that number. But let's say you have a $500,000 home and you owe $300,000 on your mortgage. That means you have $200,000 of equity. Now, if that's being shared 50-50, that means your spouse, in order for you to keep that home, you have to pay them $100,000 on top of taking over that mortgage. So you need to be able to financially afford the home and taking it over and buying the other side out. So that's the first option. So either side can do that. Sometimes it gets into a fight because both sides want to do it. If there can't be an agreement on the home, oftentimes what happens is the court will say at the end of the case, this usually does not happen during the middle of a case, but at the end of the case, the judge will say, you guys can't agree, it's got to be sold. So those are typically, you can, if there's an agreement, you can get into one person staying in the home for a period of time before it's sold. If you're keeping the decision in your own hands, it can be pretty creative and pretty flexible. If it goes in front of the judge, one person's keeping it and buying the other out, or it's getting sold.